The forest didn't bring them together by accident. It brought them together to decide who would keep the truth alive. The wolf wasn't dead. Darrow knelt in the snow, fingers pressed against the animal's ribs, breath still moving, shallow, fading. She'd tracked this wolf for 3 days through Alaska's Denali backcountry, watching it limp through the white silence, watching it refuse to stop. Now, finally still, it looked at her with eyes that didn't beg. They waited. She pulled the syringe from her pack. Sedative, not a bullet. The wolf's ear was tagged. Someone else's research animal, lost from a study she knew nothing about. Her job wasn't to kill. It was to understand what had driven it this far from its pack, this close to collapse, into a part of the forest that even the ravens avoided.
The snow began to fall harder. Darrow looked up through the spruce canopy. No stars, no moon, just the kind of Alaskan darkness that swallowed sound. She'd been a wildlife tracker for 6 years, mostly for universities, sometimes for private conservation groups. People called her a hunter, but she'd never killed anything in her life. She followed. She documented. She let the animals teach her how to see.
And right now, the wolf was teaching her that something was wrong.
The animal's heartbeat slowed under her palm. She whispered, "You ran from something." The wolf's eyes didn't close. They shifted, just barely, toward the tree line behind her. Darrow turned. A man stood 30 feet away, half hidden by a hemlock trunk. He wasn't dressed for the cold. Black jacket, no hood, leather gloves that looked expensive and useless. His face was pale, angular, mid-30s maybe, but the kind of stillness that didn't come from calm. It came from control. He didn't move, didn't speak, just watched her the way she watched animals. "You're lost," Darrow said. It wasn't a question. No, his voice was low, clipped, East Coast accent, definitely not Alaskan. "You are." She didn't stand, didn't reach for the rifle slung across her back. Instead, she kept her hand on the wolf, fingers steady on its fading pulse. "This is wildlife territory. No trails out here. If you're hiking, you took a wrong turn about 15 miles ago." "I'm not hiking." "Then what are you doing?" He stepped forward. Snow crunched under boots that were too clean for someone who'd been walking through wilderness. Waiting. Darrow's stomach tightened. Waiting. Not lost, not confused. Waiting. That meant he'd been out here on purpose, which meant he either had a camp nearby, unlikely given his condition, or he'd been dropped off. Helicopter? Maybe? But she hadn't heard rotors in 2 days. Waiting for what? She asked. The man's gaze dropped to the wolf, for that to die. Her hand stilled. Why? Because it saw something it shouldn't have. Darrow's pulse kicked. She looked down at the wolf, at the tag in its ear, at the way its body had been running not just away from something, but toward her, like it knew, like it understood that humans were dangerous, but some were less dangerous than others. "You poisoned it," she said quietly. "No." The man took another step, close enough now that she could see the shadows under his eyes, the tension in his jaw. "But someone did, and I need to know if it told you where. Wolves don't talk, they lead." His eyes locked on hers, "and you followed." Darrow's breath misted in the cold. He was right. She had followed. For 3 days, she'd tracked this animal deeper into Denali she'd never mapped, farther from any known research zone, into silence so heavy it felt wrong. She'd assumed the wolf was sick, disoriented, but now, looking at this man, at the way he stood like he owned the forest, even though the forest was trying to kill him, she realized the wolf hadn't been running away. It had been running to someone, to her. "Who are you?" Darrow asked. The man didn't answer. Instead, he reached into his jacket, slowly, carefully, and pulled out a small object. He held it up between 2 fingers. A necklace. Silver chain, pendant shaped like a compass rose, but the needle didn't point north. It pointed down. He touched it, the way people touch graves. "Do you know what this is?" he asked. Darrow stared at it. She'd seen plenty of jewelry left behind by campers, tourists, people who thought Alaska was a vacation and found out it was a test.
But this wasn't cheap sentiment. This was crafted, old, the kind of thing someone carried because it mattered. "No," she said. "Good." He lowered the necklace back into his pocket. "Involved in what?" "Survival." He glanced past her, into the dark. "Yours is about to get complicated." Before Darrow could respond, the wolf's body jerked under her hand. Not breath, not pulse, a spasm. She looked down and saw foam at its mouth, thin and pink, blood-tinged, poison, just like she'd thought. But not fast-acting. This had been slow, deliberate, designed to let the animal run far enough to lose whoever was tracking it. "It's dying," she said. "I know. You could have helped it." "No." The man's voice softened, just barely. "I couldn't." Darrow looked up at him. "Why not?" "Because the people who did this don't forgive mercy." And then, from somewhere deep in the forest, she heard it. Rotors.
Darrow knew the difference. Search patterns were wide, methodical, slow. This was tight, aggressive, circling. Whoever was flying had a target, and they were close. The man's expression didn't change, but his body did. Weight shifted forward, hands loose at his sides, ready. "They're looking for you," Darrow said. "Yes." "Who are they?" "People who think I stole something." "Did you?" His eyes flicked to hers. "Does it matter?" The rotors grew louder. Darrow stood, finally, leaving the wolf behind. It wasn't going to make it. She'd known that the moment she'd found it, but she'd hoped. Hope was stupid in Alaska. The state didn't care what you wanted. It only cared what you could survive. "You need to move," Darrow said. "I know." "Then why are you still standing here?" The man looked at the wolf, then back at her. "Because if I run, they'll know I'm close, and if they know I'm close, they'll burn this forest to find me." "Burn it?" "Flares, incendiaries. They don't care about the land." He paused. "Do you?"
Darrow's jaw tightened. She'd spent 6 years studying this ecosystem, mapping migration routes, documenting predator-prey dynamics that most people would never see. This forest wasn't scenery, it was a language, and these people were about to set fire to the dictionary. "Yes," she said. "Then help me." "Why would I?" "Because if you don't, everything you've been tracking dies." The helicopter banked overhead. Searchlights swept through the trees, a white blade cutting through darkness. Darrow ducked instinctively, pulling the man down with her. They crouched behind a fallen spruce, breath clouding between them. "What did you steal?" she whispered. "Information." "About what?" "About who owns this forest." Darrow frowned. "The state owns it. It's federal land." The man shook his head. "Not on paper, not in practice." The searchlight passed over them. Darrow's radio crackled, her emergency beacon tied to the university's frequency. A voice came through, distorted by static. "Darrow, do you copy? We're getting irregular movement in your sector. Confirm your position." She didn't answer. The voice wasn't from the university. She knew every dispatcher, every field coordinator. This was someone else using their channel. The man watched her. "They're tracking you now." "How?" "Your gear, your beacon, anything with a signal." He glanced at her pack. "Turn it off." "I can't. It's my emergency line." "It's their map." Darrow hesitated. 6 years in the field, and she'd never gone dark. The beacon was survival. It was the difference between rescue and exposure. But the voice on the radio wasn't trying to rescue her. It was trying to locate her. She reached into her pack and switched it off. The forest went silent. The man nodded. "Smart. Don't compliment me, just tell me what I'm in the middle of."
He looked at the necklace in his hand, the one with the compass rose pointing down. You ever hear of the Teslan Accord? No. Good. Most people haven't. He turned the pendant over. It's a land agreement, private, unofficial, signed 40 years ago between a coalition of developers and a family that's been in Alaska since before statehood. The deal gave them subsurface rights to half of Denali's backcountry. Mining, drilling, logging, anything under the snow. Darrow's stomach dropped. That's illegal. Only if someone enforces it. The federal government doesn't. The paperwork was buried, literally, in a vault in Anchorage that burned down in 1987. He held up the necklace. This is the only remaining proof. Darrow stared at the pendant. It looked like jewelry, sentiment, but the needle pointing down wasn't decorative. It was directional, a marker.
"You're saying that necklace is a map," she said, "to the vault's backup, a secondary cache hidden somewhere in this forest." He met her eyes. "And the people in that helicopter will kill anyone who knows it exists." The rotors circled closer. Darrow's mind raced. If what he was saying was true, this forest wasn't protected, it was claimed. And the wolf, the one dying 10 feet away, had stumbled onto something it shouldn't have. A site, a marker, something that led back to the cache. "Why are you telling me this?" she asked. "Because you're the only person out here who isn't trying to kill me. Yet." He almost smiled. Yet. The searchlight swung back toward them. This time, it stopped, held. Someone had seen something. "Move," the man said. They ran. The forest had rules. Darrow knew them. The man didn't. She led him through a gully thick with devil's club, thorns catching at their jackets, snow dumping from branches overhead. Behind them, the helicopter hovered, its light fixed on the spot where they'd been crouched. Voices shouted through a loudspeaker, commands she couldn't make out, didn't want to. "Where are we going?" the man asked, breath ragged. "Somewhere they can't land." "There's nowhere they can't land." Darrow didn't answer. She pushed through a thicket of alder, boots sinking into snow that hid ice underneath. The man stumbled. She caught his arm, pulled him forward. He wasn't built for this. Too rigid, too used to pavement. "You need to trust the ground," she said. "The ground is trying to kill me." "No, you're trying to fight it." She stopped, turned. "Feel where your weight is. Don't stomp. Shift." He stared at her like she'd spoken another language. "Do it," she said, "or you'll break an ankle and I'll leave you here." He adjusted, slowly, testing his footing. The next step was quieter. "Better," Darrow said. They moved deeper. The helicopter's light faded behind them, but the sound didn't. It was tracking, repatterning, widening its search. Darrow knew they had maybe 10 minutes before thermal imaging picked them up. Body heat in snow was a beacon. "We need cold," she said. "We're in Alaska. Colder." She scanned the terrain, looking for what she knew was there, a creek. Snowmelt runoff fed by glaciers upstream. The water would be just above freezing, cold enough to mask their heat signature if they moved through it. She found it 30 yards ahead, a ribbon of black cutting through white. The man followed her to the edge, looked down. "You're joking." "No." "That's hypothermia in 2 minutes." "3 if you keep moving." Darrow stepped in. The cold was a fist around her bones, but she didn't stop. "Come on." He hesitated. Then, slowly, he followed. The water was knee-deep, fast-moving. Cold, it burned. Darrow waded upstream, every step deliberate. The current wanted to pull her down, wanted to take her legs from under her, but she'd done this before. Not for survival, for research. Following salmon runs, checking water temperature,
learning how to move through a river that didn't care if you lived or died. The man gasped behind her. How long? Until they pass. And if they don't, then we stay until we can't. The helicopter swung overhead. Darrow crouched, pulling the man down with her. Water rushed past their chests. The cold was absolute, a kind of pain that made you forget everything except the need to get out. But she didn't move, not yet. The searchlight skimmed over the creek, held, then moved on. They didn't see us, the man whispered. They will if you keep talking. He went quiet. They waited. 5 minutes, 10. The helicopter circled twice more, then banked north. The sound faded. Darrow counted to 60 and stood. Her legs screamed. The man didn't move. Get up, she said. I can't feel my feet. That's normal. Get up anyway. She hauled him to his feet, dragged him out of the water. They collapsed on the bank, shivering violently. Darrow knew the protocol. Strip, dry off, get into thermal layers. But they didn't have time. The helicopter was gone, but it would come back. Take off your jacket, she said. What? It's soaked. You'll freeze faster wearing it than without it. He stared at her. Then, slowly, he shrugged it off. Underneath, his shirt was plastered to his skin, shaking. Darrow pulled a thermal blanket from her pack, one of the emergency ones, silver and crinkly, and wrapped it around him. This won't last. We need fire. Fire will give us away. Hypothermia will kill us faster than they will. She gathered deadfall, dry wood, sheltered under the snow. The man watched, teeth chattering. You do this often? Survive? Yes. Run from helicopters? First time. Darrow struck her flint, sparks catching on birch bark. A small flame curled up. She fed it carefully. You? Too many times. The fire grew. Warmth started to push back the cold. Darrow held her hands over it, watching the man across from her. He was still shaking, but his eyes were steady, calculating. You didn't have to help me, he said. I know. So why did you do? Darrow didn't answer immediately. She thought about the wolf, about the way it had looked at her, not with fear, but with something else, recognition, like it knew she was someone who followed things, who understood. Because, she said finally, I want to know what you're running from. The man pulled the necklace from his pocket. It caught the firelight, silver glinting. I'm not running from something, I'm running to it. The cash? Yes, and what's in it?
He looked at her, proof that this forest was sold, that someone's been mining it illegally for 30 years, that every conservation study, every federal protection, every map you've ever used, he paused, is a lie. Darrow's chest tightened. You're saying my work doesn't matter? I'm saying your work has been covering for something you didn't know existed. He held up the necklace. This compass doesn't point north. It points to the cache, and once I find it, everything changes. For who? For everyone who thought they were protecting this place. Darrow stared into the fire. 6 years. 6 years of tracking migration patterns, documenting population shifts, believing that the data mattered, that someone was listening. And now this man, this stranger, was telling her it had all been theater. Who are you? She asked again. This time, he answered. My name is Cael Ventriss. I used to work for the people in that helicopter.
Cael didn't look like a criminal. But then Darrow thought the best ones never did. You worked for them? She said slowly. Doing what? Accounting. Accounting. Laundering, technically. Money from subsurface mining operations. Illegal drilling. Timber contracts that didn't exist on any federal registry. I made it look legitimate. Darrow's hands tightened around her knees. For how long? 8 years? And you just decided to stop? No. He looked at the fire. I found out what they were drilling for. What? Cael reached into his jacket, still damp, still cold, and pulled out a small vial. Inside, a dark liquid sloshed, thick, almost black. Heavy crude, he said, but not from a drillable depth. This came from a glacial melt pocket, an underground reservoir that's been frozen for 10,000 years. Darrow took the vial, held it up to the firelight. So
It's full of methane, locked carbon. The kind that, if released, would accelerate warming faster than anything we've seen. He met her eyes. They're not drilling for oil. They're drilling for leverage. Leverage? Environmental blackmail. Release enough of this and you can negotiate anything. Carbon credits, international treaties. They're sitting on a geological weapon, and they're about to use it. Darrow's stomach turned. She'd heard about feedback loops, permafrost melt, methane release, runaway warming. But this wasn't accidental. This was designed. Why tell me? She asked. Because you're the only person who's been mapping this forest long enough to know where the drilling sites are hidden. I don't. Yes, you do. Cael leaned forward. This is your research, published 2 years ago. Territory shifts in Denali wolf populations. Darrow went still. He was right. She had noticed. 3 years ago, a pack that had denned in the northern ridge suddenly moved south. No prey shift, no human activity, just avoidance. She'd marked it as unexplained behavior, assumed it was scent-related. But now, they were avoiding drill sites, she said quietly. Yes, and I documented it. You mapped it. Cael pulled out a folded piece of paper. This is your research, published 2 years ago. Territory shifts in Denali wolf populations.
Darrow recognized it. Her own study. The university had published it in a conservation journal, proud of the work. She'd thought it was helping protect the wolves. You're saying I led them to the sites? She said. No, I'm saying you confirmed what they already knew. Cael's voice softened. They've been using your work to avoid detection. Every time you publish a migration route, they adjust their drilling schedules. You're not the problem, Darrow. You're the cover. She wanted to throw the paper into the fire, wanted to scream, but instead she folded it carefully and put it in her pocket. What do you need from me? She asked. The necklace points to the cache, but I don't know the terrain. You do. And when we find it, we take it public, expose the drilling, stop the release. They'll kill you. They'll try. Cael looked at the necklace in his hand, but I didn't come this far to stay quiet. Darrow studied him. He was scared. She could see it in the way his fingers gripped the pendant, in the way his breathing hitched between words, but he wasn't turning back. Why? She asked. Why whisk this? Cael was quiet for a long moment. Then he said, because my daughter drew me a picture of a wolf once. She was 6. She asked me if wolves lived forever.
He pulled a second item from his pocket, a piece of paper folded small. He opened it carefully. A child's drawing, crayon, bright blue wolf, yellow trees, a sky full of stars. I told her yes, Cael said, and then I helped bury the forest that keeps them alive. Darrow looked at the drawing, at the wolf, smiling in a way wolves never did, at the sky, impossibly full. She doesn't know what you do, Darrow said. No, and she won't, because I'm going to fix it before she's old enough to ask questions I can't answer. He folded the drawing and put it away. Darrow stared into the fire. Power, she thought. Real power wasn't in money. It wasn't in helicopters or drills or vaults. It was in the moment someone decided that a promise to a child mattered more than survival. Okay, she said. Okay?
I'll help you find the cache. Cael exhaled. Thank you. Don't thank me yet. Darrow stood, stomping out the fire. If we're doing this, we do it my way. No shortcuts, no risks that don't have a reason. And if I say run, you run. Understood? Understood. Good. Now show me how this thing works. Cael pointed to the compass rose. The needle, instead of pointing north, pointed southeast. It's calibrated to a magnetic anomaly, something buried deep enough to pull a compass off true north. The cache? Yes, but it's not going to be a straight line. We'll have to adjust for terrain.
Darrow looked at the direction. Southeast. Through a valley she'd mapped once 3 years ago, a place where the wolves wouldn't go. She said, I know where it is. You do? There's a ridge, granite outcrop. I've never been able to get close because the ground doesn't make sense. Compasses spin, GPS goes haywire. Cael nodded slowly. That's it. Then we move at first light. Why not now? Because, Darrow said, looking into the dark, the forest doesn't let you see what it's hiding until it's ready.
Morning came slowly. The cold was worse. Darrow woke to frost on her eyelashes, breath visible in the air inside her sleeping bag. Across from her, Cael hadn't slept. She could tell by the way he sat, too upright, too still. People who slept in the wilderness learned to collapse. He was holding himself together. You okay? She asked. Define okay. Alive? Functional? Then yes. Darrow rolled out of her bag, started moving. Motion was warmth. She pulled jerky from her pack, handed him half. He took it without comment, chewing mechanically. We have about 6 hours before they widen the search, maybe less. How do you know? Because that's what I would do. She checked her compass, still spinning. They were close to the anomaly. They'll assume we headed toward a road, toward people. They won't expect us to go deeper. Unless they know about the cache. Do they? Cael shook his head. I don't think so. The necklace was my father's. He died before he could tell anyone what it meant. Your father worked for them? He founded them. Darrow stopped. What? My father started the coalition, the Teslan Accord. He believed in development, in progress. He thought Alaska was wasted on preservation. Cael's voice went flat. I spent my whole life trying to be like him, and then I found out what he'd actually built. A lie. A kingdom, Cael said, looked at her, and I was the prince who didn't want the throne. Darrow shouldered her pack. Then let's burn it down. They moved southeast. The terrain shifted as they walked. Snow gave way to exposed rock, granite slabs slick with ice. The trees thinned. Darrow had been here once before, years ago, trying to track a wolf that vanished into the ridge. She'd lost the trail, lost her compass, lost her nerve. Now she understood why. The ground here is wrong, she said. Wrong how? Magnetic interference, subsurface metal maybe, or something else. Something else, Cael confirmed. He held up the necklace. The needle spun wildly, then locked, pointed straight down. We're standing on it, Darrow said. Cael knelt, brushing snow away from the rock. Underneath, she saw it, a seam, too straight to be natural, too deliberate. It's a hatch, she said. Cael found the edge, fingers tracing the outline. Help me. They worked together, prying at the stone. It didn't budge. Darrow pulled a climbing tool from her pack, wedged it into the seam and leveraged. The hatch groaned, shifted.
Then it opened. Below, darkness, a ladder bolted into stone, descending into a shaft that smelled of oil and rust. "This is it," Cael whispered. "You first," Darrow said. "Why me?" "Because if it collapses, I'm the one who knows how to get out of here." He didn't argue. He climbed down. Darrow followed. The shaft was narrow, cold, and older than she'd expected. The ladder rungs were solid, industrial, the kind built to last. At the bottom, a tunnel opened up, concrete walls, fluorescent lights long dead, and a door at the far end.
Cael approached it. The door was steel, locked, with a keypad that hadn't worked in decades. "Now what?" Darrow asked. Cael pulled the necklace off, pressed the compass rose against the keypad. Something clicked. The door hissed open. Inside, the cache. It wasn't large, just a room 10 feet by 10 with metal shelves lining the walls, documents, files, maps, and in the center, a single table with a locked box. Cael opened it. Inside, a hard drive, old, probably 1980s tech, but intact. "This is it," he said. "The original agreements, the drilling permits, everything." Darrow looked at the files on the shelves. 40 years of secrets, 40 years of a forest left alone because no one knew what was underneath. "What do we do with it?" she asked. "We take it, we publish it, we end this. And then," Cael looked at her, "and then we see if promises still matter." But Darrow stood there, staring at the hard drive in his hands, a thought crystallized, sharp, cutting. "Wait," she said. Cael looked up. "If we expose this," Darrow said slowly, "the coalition collapses, the drilling stops. But what happens to the forest? It's protected." "Is it?" She stepped closer. "If the world finds out there's a methane reserve under Denali, what do you think happens next? International pressure, energy companies, climate activists fighting energy lobbyists. This forest becomes a battleground." Cael's jaw tightened. "And battles destroy ground, even the ones fought with lawyers." She looked at the files on the shelves. 40 years of secrets. 40 years of a forest left alone because no one knew what was underneath. If exposing the truth destroys the forest, is silence a crime or a responsibility? Cael didn't answer. Darrow's voice dropped. "Maybe your father wasn't just burying evidence. Maybe he was protecting something no one else knew how to save." The silence between them stretched. Finally, Cael said, "Then what do we do?" "I don't know yet." Darrow looked at the necklace in his hand. "But I think the answer isn't in that drive. It's in what your father was trying to tell you by hiding it."
They didn't make it 10 feet before the lights came on. Not the dead fluorescents, new lights, tactical, mounted on helmets. 4 men stood at the tunnel entrance, rifles raised. Darrow froze. Cael didn't. "Put it down," one of the men said. His voice was calm, practiced. Cael held the hard drive tighter. "I said, put it down." "No." The man's rifle didn't waver. "We'll kill her first." Cael looked at Darrow. She saw the calculation in his eyes, weighing, measuring. "Don't," she said quietly. "They'll kill us both. Maybe, but if you give them that drive, they kill everyone." Cael's jaw tightened. The man stepped closer. "You have 3 seconds. 1 question. No questions. Just one." Cael's voice was steady. "Do you know what's on this drive?" "It doesn't matter." "It does." Cael held it up. "This isn't just data.
It's a countdown to a methane release that will make Deepwater Horizon look like a leak. You're lying. Am I? Cael's eyes locked on him. Check with your boss. Ask him what happens if the drilling schedules on this drive go public. Ask him how many years before the melt pocket collapses. The man's radio crackled. A voice came through, terse, commanding. The man listened. His expression didn't change, but his rifle lowered, just slightly. They want you alive. For now, Cael replied. For testimony. Or silence. The man looked at Darrow. And her? She's a witness. She doesn't matter.
Darrow felt something cold settle in her chest. Doesn't matter. 6 years of work, 6 years of believing that documentation, research, truth mattered, and to them, she was furniture. Let her go, Cael said. No, she's not part of this. She is now. Darrow's hand drifted to her pack, slowly, carefully. Inside, her flare gun. She'd carried it for emergencies, bear encounters, signal fires. Not this. But maybe this counted? I'm going to reach into my pack, she said. Don't! She pulled the flare gun out, fired. The flare screamed up the tunnel, white-hot, blinding. The men shouted. Darrow grabbed Cael, yanked him toward a side passage she'd seen on the way in, a ventilation shaft too narrow for tactical gear. They ran. Behind them, gunfire. Concrete chips exploded off the walls. Darrow didn't look back. She shoved Cael into the shaft, climbed in after him. The space was tight, suffocating, but it angled upward. Keep moving, she hissed. They crawled, 10 feet, 20. The shaft opened into another tunnel, older, rougher, carved by hand instead of machines. Where does this go? Cael gasped. I don't know. Great plan. He didn't answer. They kept moving. The tunnel twisted, descended, then rose again. Darrow's hands were raw from the rock, her knees bruised. Behind them she heard voices, footsteps, closer. Then, ahead, light, not artificial, daylight. They stumbled out into the open air, blinking in the brightness. They were on the ridge, higher than they'd started, surrounded by snow and silence, and standing 30 feet away, waiting, was the wolf. Not the one from before, a different one, larger, older. Its eyes were yellow, patient. Darrow stopped. Cael stared. What is it doing? Watching. Why? Because, Darrow said slowly, it knows something we don't. The wolf turned and started walking. Not away, parallel, following the ridgeline. It wants us to follow it, Cael said. Yes. Why? I don't know. Darrow looked back at the tunnel. Voices echoed from inside, but I trust it more than I trust them. They followed the wolf. The wolf led them to water. Not a creek, a lake, hidden in a cirque surrounded by cliffs. The surface was frozen, black ice gleaming under the late morning sun. The wolf stopped at the edge, looked back at them, then walked onto the ice. No, Darrow said. What? That ice isn't stable. It's too thin for this time of year. How do you know? Look at the color. Black ice means it's fresh, less than a week old. But the wolf, it weighs 100 pounds. We don't. The wolf stopped in the center of the lake, waited. Cael looked at Darrow. It's trying to tell us something. Or it's trying to kill us. Animals don't lie. They also don't understand weight distribution. Behind them, shouts. The men were close. Cael stepped onto the ice. Don't! He took another step. The ice groaned but held. Darrow cursed. She followed. Every step was a negotiation with gravity. The ice creaked, shifted, but didn't break. The wolf watched them approach, yellow eyes patient. When they reached the center, the wolf turned and walked to the far edge, safe, deliberate.
"See?" Cael said. "It knew." Or we got lucky. Then from the shore, a crack, loud, sharp. Darrow turned. The men stood at the edge. One of them had fired, not at them, at the ice. "They're trying to break it. Move!" They ran. The ice splintered beneath them, cracks racing outward like veins. Darrow felt the surface tilt, felt cold water bite at her boots. She grabbed Cael's arm, pulled him forward. The wolf barked, once, sharp.
Darrow looked up. The far shore was close, 20 feet maybe, but the ice between them and solid ground was fracturing fast. "Jump," she said. "What?" "When I say jump." "That's insane." 3, 2. The ice gave way. They plunged into water so cold it stopped thought. Darrow kicked, fought upward, broke the surface, gasping. Cael surfaced beside her, the hard drive still clutched in his hand. The shore was 10 feet away. Darrow swam, every stroke fire and ice until her hands hit rock. She dragged herself out, hauled Cael up after her. The wolf stood on the bank, watching. Behind them, the men were still on the far shore. The ice between had collapsed entirely. They weren't following. Darrow collapsed onto the ground, shaking violently. Cael sat beside her, breath ragged. "You okay?" Define okay. He almost laughed. The wolf turned and walked into the trees. "Where's it going?" Cael asked. "I don't know," Darrow said, "but we need fire, now." They found shelter in a cluster of boulders, shielded from wind. Darrow built another fire, hands shaking so hard she could barely hold the flint. When the flames caught, she stripped off her outer layers, wrung them out, hung them close to the heat. Cael did the same. Then he checked the hard drive. "It's waterproof," he said, relieved. "Good, because I'm not doing that again." He looked at her. "Thank you." "For what?" "For not leaving me on that ice." Darrow didn't answer. She stared into the fire, thinking about the wolf, about the way it had waited, had led, had known. "Animals don't lie," she said quietly. "What?" "You said animals don't lie. You're right, they don't. But they also don't save people. Then why did it?" "I don't know." Darrow pulled the necklace from her pocket. She'd grabbed it when they'd fled the cache. She held it up. The compass rose, spun, then stopped, pointed west. "It's still pointing somewhere," Cael said. "Not to the cache, somewhere else. Maybe there's a second sight." Darrow frowned. "Or maybe the necklace isn't about finding something. Maybe it's about protecting it." Cael went still. "What do you mean?" "Your father didn't bury proof. He buried a warning."
The second site wasn't a vault, it was a grave. They found it 2 hours later, following the necklace's needle through a forest that felt older, quieter. The trees here were massive, centuries old, their roots tangled in soil that hadn't been disturbed in lifetimes. The wolf was waiting. It sat beside a stone cairn, half buried in snow. The necklace's needle pointed directly at it. Darrow knelt, brushed the snow away. Underneath, carved into the stone, Teslin, 1983. "Your father's name?" she asked. "No." Cael's voice was tight. "His partner's." "Partner?" "The man who co-signed the accord, the one who wanted to stop it." Cael touched the stone. "My father buried him here, told everyone he disappeared, and then he took the coalition forward without him." Darrow's chest tightened. "This isn't a cache, it's a confession." "Yes." She looked at the cairn, at the way the wolf sat beside it, still and reverent. The wolf knows. How? I don't know, but it keeps coming back here, like it's guarding something. Cael pulled the hard drive from his jacket. Then maybe we're supposed to leave this here too. What? Think about it. The necklace doesn't point to the cache. It points here, to the truth my father tried to bury. He looked at Darrow. What if the real power isn't in exposing them, it's in making sure the forest remembers?
Darrow stared at him. You're saying we don't publish the drive? I'm saying we protect it, the way he should have. And the drilling? The methane release? We stop it another way. How? Cael was quiet. Then he said, we give them something they can't ignore. What? He pulled out his phone. Still no signal, but the camera worked. We document everything. The cairn, the necklace, the wolf, which sat patiently as Cael filmed. Darrow narrated, explaining the migration patterns, the anomalies, the way the forest had been trying to tell them something for years. When they were done, Cael buried the hard drive beneath the cairn. Why? Asked Darrow. Because, said Cael, some truths are safest when they're not convenient. The wolf stood, stretched, and walked away. They didn't follow. 3 weeks later, Darrow stood in front of a congressional committee. Cael sat beside her, the necklace still around his neck. The footage had gone viral. Millions of views, news coverage, questions from environmental groups, federal agencies, journalists who couldn't believe what they were seeing. The coalition had denied everything, called it fabrication, but the questions kept coming. And then someone found the cairn. Forensics confirmed it. Human remains, 1983, matching dental records of the man who disappeared 40 years ago. The Teslan Accord collapsed within a week. Now Darrow sat in a hearing room, answering questions about wolves, migration routes, and the forest that had taught her to listen. Ms. Darrow, a senator said, do you believe the wolf was protecting the site? She looked at the necklace on Cael's chest, at the compass rose pointing down. I believe, she said carefully, that the wolf was doing what wolves do, following the land, trusting the patterns, and teaching us to do the same. And Mr. Ventriss, you buried evidence of a crime. Why? Cael's voice was steady. Because some truths matter more than revenge. That's not how justice works. Maybe not. Cael looked at the committee. But it's how memory works, and sometimes remembering is stronger than punishing. The hearing ended. No charges, no arrests, just questions that would take years to answer. Outside, Darrow and Cael stood on the steps of the Capitol. What now? He asked. I go back to the forest. And me? Darrow pulled the necklace from his neck. You give this to your daughter. Why? Because, she said, promises outlast fear. Cael took the necklace, folded it carefully into his pocket. Darrow walked away. 6 months later, a researcher in Denali found something strange. A wolf pack denning in the northern ridge, right where the old drilling sites had been. The lead wolf, a large female with yellow eyes, watched from the trees as the researchers set up cameras. When the researcher left, the wolf walked to the cairn, now marked with federal protection signs. She sat beside it, waited, and the forest kept its promise. Every system survives on what people agree not to see. If this story made you think about what we're protecting and what we're not, subscribe for more stories that ask the questions we're too afraid to answer. Because the truth isn't always what we expose. Sometimes it's what we choose to remember.